All right, so since it's just you in the lab, we can be more interactive. And if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me or add it to the chat. Basically, this is a hands-on lab for building agents with C Sharp. I have an ongoing recurring session on Mondays at 6 p.m. where I go into the overall overview of agents, how to create them, how they work, and all the components of building them out. That's more general. And a lot more non-developers or developers looking to do things in other languages, Python or whatever, I typically join that one, so it's more interactive. I created this one because it's this one is more based on just the code for the agent and how to create an agent and what's really happening at that agent level. So that's what this is geared towards. Basically, on today's topic, today's session, we'll be talking about the foundations of it, which will be focusing on AI Foundry. We'll be building a console application, and this will be a demonstration. And then we'll also be doing a step-by-step addition of tool calls. If you would like to follow along in what we are doing, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. You will need a subscription to Azure, of course, because that's where everything is ultimately set up. And the version of .NET that we'll be using for this demonstration is .NET 10. And I'll be, again, just walking through. So for these particular instances, the best thing to do is if you'd like to follow along, again, just, get your environment set up and follow along. Otherwise, for these sessions, I'll actually be sharing the video so you can go back and watch the video and follow along at your own pace. The video will be shared on YouTube, so you can go to our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/@thethinkmind. We've got about 250,000 subscribers. So by all means, like our videos and subscribe as well.
Okay.
Also, sorry, did you have a question?
No.
Yeah.
I
So
was just
also,
saying.
if you'd like to follow me, and if you have any additional questions, and if you along your journey of C Sharp and programming and technology and Azure, I am a Microsoft MVP, so you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Friend me or whatever it's called, connect with me on LinkedIn. And of course, if you have any questions, you can just ping me over LinkedIn chat, and I will answer those questions for you. There won't be much in terms of slides. There's only one more slide, and then we're going to actually get into the meat and potatoes of creating it. And this final slide is basically just a quick overview and understanding of agents. I like to use this slide because I think it really clearly articulates what an agent is and what the principles behind working with it are, which again, if you look at yourself as a human being and self-examine, you respond to stimuli, you do some processing of it, and then you react in some way. Agents function essentially the same way. They respond to events. Those events are sent and connected to a reasoning model, and then after that, some action is taken. And events could be HTTP endpoint calls, so calling a web page or a website or a web service, email, text messages, whether it's to your phone or Teams or wherever. Sensor data, which can be like your ring camera or doorbell, or your heater in your house, your Nest heater. There are parts of an agent that are mechanical, meaning they're parts that are highly predictable. Like we know we want these things to function in a very deterministic way. And there are parts of an agent that are nuanced, right, and require some kind of natural language. So some things we want the agent to respond to do a lot more thinking, right? So, and some things essentially are just hard-coded programming, so to speak, to function a certain way. And then another key thing to note is that time is a condition of agents, right, and of ourselves, right? So one of the key pieces of making an agent autonomous is to have it wake up every once in a while, do some work, and then go back to sleep. So that's added to you being able to interact it using the various mechanisms, and also it also making decisions based on sensor data, which functions similar to time. So that's it for the slide deck, and we can get directly into working on this. So a couple of things we're going to be working on. We're going to be creating again an AI Foundry application. So let's go ahead and let's do that quickly. So to get that going, if you're in Azure, you basically go over to Azure OpenAI. You can click on it, and what you're looking for within Azure OpenAI is this item here called Foundry, right? So this Foundry item, and we select that, and we're actually going to create a new one, okay? And we'll put it in a demo resource group, and let's just call it Agnes. Okay. And then there's a lot of things that you can do with your agent. There's things associated with storage. So you can set up key vaults. You can add app insights to it. You can set up networking, which will allow it to connect back into your Azure backend services. You can give your agent identity. This is system assigned, user assigned. It's basically the Azure setup. You can, of course, add encryption to your agents. We're not going to do any of that because this is a pretty straightforward demo that we're creating. So we're just going to create the demo outright. And once that agent is created, we'll actually go into it and I'll show you a couple of things associated with it. Remember that when we say something is a Foundry project, what's happening underneath the surface of any of these Foundry applications and many of the app services and Azure applications is that you're ultimately working with VMs, either VMs directly by themselves or VMs that are sitting in that are or containers that are sitting in VMs, I should say. So we have that now set up so we can actually go into our Agnes 2 Foundry project. And inside the project, you can see that from an Azure perspective, you still have the ability to add keys and endpoints. You still have the ability to add networking. You'll still have the ability to do app insights, which is a way to do health activity monitoring on your project, and many more things. So it's in many cases an Azure a resource that you can play around with. But to actually configure the agent, you don't do that in the Azure portal itself. You actually have to click into it. So let's go ahead and let's click here. And this now takes you into the AI Foundry. So a couple of things to note here is this dashboard area that we're in right now. Okay, and you can see that there's a default name given to the project. You can see that there's a URL that's specified for it. In fact, there are multiple URLs. There's a Foundry URL. There's an OpenAI URL, which is the one we'll be using. And then there's also an AI services URL for doing speech to text, text to speech, things of that nature. And if we click on view all endpoints and we go to model deployments, you see that there's nothing there. This is because we don't actually have a model specified yet. Now, where are these models? So if you go over to the model catalog, you'll find that there are numerous models in there. You'll see this thing here that says model leaderboard. So here you can actually compare and contrast between different models that have been created, why you should use one, why you should not use one. There's a model index catalog. There's a leaderboard, and you can see that GPT 5.2 is the latest. There's criteria that's used to indicate this. So it's all very important for you to sort of like understand what's going on in each of these, why you should use one versus the other, what the value proposition is, what the performance profile is, and what the security profile is. And of course, from any of these, you can try within a playground. You can evaluate on your data, and you can actually select to use this model. When you select to use that model, then that model will be deployed onto infrastructure within your Azure that you can then leverage and use to do some further processing or writing code based on. So for this demo, we're going to be using, let's go back to the model catalog. We're going to be using GPT-4, so you can search for it here. We're actually going to be using GPT 4.1. So select that, and you go in there, and you can see it's got some information associated with it. It's got some benchmarks that you can look at. So all kind of stuff like what's going on with safety, what's the AI quality look like, what's the cost, how much is it going to cost, which is very important. What's the throughput, and of course, what's the latency. So you have a lot of information that you can pull out of these models. And I would recommend that when you go into AI Foundry, you actually do some reviewing of the different models to understand what the value proposition of one model versus another is. To use the model, you basically just click Use Model. And then when you click Use Model, you'll see that there's a number of deployment types. And then there's also a deployment name that you can provide it. And then there's some customizations that you can do here. So we're going to use the standard deployment type. And in here, we're just going to call it Agnes 2 GPT 4.1. So not doing anything too crazy here, right? And you can see that you can pick here what AI resource you want it associated with. And we're saying that we want it associated with Agnes Foundry 2. Okay. So let's go in here once we're done, and we just connect and deploy. And that's going to take your AI, and it's going to basically dump it into infrastructure to allow you to play around with it. So once that's created, you can, oh, actually I created in the wrong resource. Let's take a step back here. Make sure that we have it in the right one because we don't want to mess around too much. That's the guy we want. And that is located here. Okay, perfect. Then we'll go here again and that guy again. And just make sure that it's actually being deployed in the right space. Hmm. Oh, it seems like we don't have any quota for that. So we'll just use this to, it really doesn't make a difference what project you connected to. Ultimately, what matters is what's going on here. So with that in mind, that has been deployed. So if we now go to view all deployments and we go over to model deployments, we should now see here this Agnes 2 GPT. So this is the model that we just created, right? So we can click on this guy. And then we go in here, we can see the URL associated with it. We can see a key tied to it. And then we can see that you can actually open this deployment inside of a playground. So let's go ahead and let's do that. So that brings you in here into a view where you can play around with the model that you just created. And as I always do, I'm just going to say the price. Say London is $10. And then once you specify that, you can click on apply changes. And then when you apply changes, what it's going to do is going to do a fast train of this model that you have here, which is the standard language model plus the data that's associated here. So that in here, I can then type in what is the price of tea. And it's going to tell you that you mentioned that the price of tea in London is $10. So it's basically just regurgitating the information that you have there. But we can even get a little bit cooler than that. You know, you can also say the price of tea in France is $15 and apply those changes. And then over here, I can ask what is the average price of tea? Okay, so what it's done is it's done the calculation for you now. It knows the price of tea in London and France. It's created an average price, and so you now have your average price printed out. Right. So that's pretty much it in terms of like configuring your AI and getting your AI model good to go. We now have the brains of our program, and we're now going to flip over into code to basically demonstrate the way this works from a coding perspective. And to do that, we're actually not going to use this model that we created. We're going to use our Agnes model, which exists here, which we've already created, and which, if we go into view all endpoints, right, we can see that there's already an Agnes GPT-4 endpoint created that's set up, and this is basically a model that we can use and leverage. We can see the metrics associated with it, the same thing, how much it costs, how many requests have been put into it, how many tokens have been completed. And that is one important thing to note, is that there is an average count per token. And remember that a token is not a word. A token is a part of a word that's returned, right? So it is important to note that you pay per token, and there is a cost component to anything you're doing with AI, and make sure that you're functioning the right way with it. Now, if you look over here to the right side of it, you see that there's all kinds of stuff around languages, right? So for example, I can look at the API key, how to set this up, how it's structured, how to make calls into it. And I can also do the same thing for JavaScript, and that shows well how you would do this in JavaScript. I can also do the same thing for REST, show you how to do it using a RESTful endpoint. And of course, what we're going to be doing today, C#, and it'll show you that. And even within the playground, you can actually see the same kind of thing, right? So I can even go in here and click view code. And when I click on view code, I can decide what kind of API I want to use. So here's the Open API SDK and what language I want to use. In this case, I'm going to be using C#. And you can see that to rebuild essentially the functionality that we just tested, it probably takes somewhere around 40 lines of code. Right, so let's get into Visual Studio Code, and let's try to use Zaria, the API that we're going to be using to this test, and see if we can beat this 40 lines of code level. Right, so I'm going to minimize this, and we will open up a Visual Studio project. So we got a Visual Studio Code project here, nothing special. So Control-Shift-P opens up your project settings, and I can click a new project, and I want a console application. And I'm just creating a folder where this will be located, and we'll call it Agnes console. And we want to use SLNX. Let's create the project, and Bob's your uncle, we're done. And I'm going to trust this guy. Now, to make this more, I guess more human readable, I'm actually going to switch this over to the standard way that projects are created, or C# projects are created with namespaces and all that. But before I get into that, let's go into the code, and let's add a reference to our the NuGet package that we want to use. So to add NuGet packages to Visual Studio Code projects, just do .NET add package. And the package we want is called Zaria.ai. Oh, so we're going to have to go into, we're not in the right folder. So let's go into Agnes console. Okay, so now we're in the right folder. So for you to add to a project, you have to have the C# project that you're actually adding to located there. Here's the actual project we're adding to. You'll note that there's no references here. So let's just go ahead and let's add that. Okay, and you can see that all it's really done is just add a package reference to the Zaria.ai, right? So that we are good to go with that. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a settings a project. Convert this over to the regular main style. I'm just going to add a new project here called a new file, sorry. And inside this file, we're going to take some of the information that we previously had in our Azure portal, and we're going to move it here so we can use it. If you recall, over there, we had the models set up. So let's go to and over here, we had these models set up that we were using. And we had, let's go to the model catalog, I'm sorry, the overview. So in here, we've got like some settings tied to it. We have a key located here, which we can take, okay? So we can call it public. And we're just going to create a simple getter and setter property for that. Okay, so that represents the key. And the reason we're doing this is because you typically don't want to expose this information, anywhere, right? You want it to be reusable so you can actually change it at a later date. You don't want to hard code it into the actual use of it within your application. Okay. So we now have the key. The next thing we need is we need the endpoint, which we can get from here. And again, remember that the endpoint we're using is the OpenAI endpoint. So we copy that. Okay. And then finally, we need our deployment name. And our deployment name is in here. It's called Agnes GPT 4.1. That's what it's configured. And again, whenever you create, like if I go in here and I say I want to add a new deployment, and I click on that, when I pick the thing that I want to deploy, I get to select the name. And again, you see all the different things here. So if I pick another 4.1 and I say confirm, then it'll give me the options to pick the settings, to pick the name, to pick all those kind of things, right? So let's call it AI endpoint, AI access key, and AI deployment name. Okay. Now we have all the pieces that we need to leverage Agnes within our program. So the next thing we need to do is obviously add a reference to the actual Agnes API, right? So I'm sorry, to the actual Zaria API call. So we're going to use using zaria.ai.chat. And then after that, we're basically set up and ready to start slinging code. Now, Zaria uses a plugin model where you actually plug into your AI. so that when you ask the AI questions, in certain cases, it will be run by the AI, and in certain cases, it will be pushed down to your program, and then your program will actually do the running for you. So to do that, you need to specify within your assembly one place that you specify something called an AI plugin, right? And we can just call this Agnes AI plugin. And then you then give your description for for the plugin, right? And so this is going to tell your program what this plugin does, what are the capabilities of this particular plugin. So for this program, we're telling ChatGPT 4.1, right? Whatever we type in here, right? So we're going to say you are a helpful AI agent named Agnes. You know the Okay, so nothing different than what we previously specified. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new AI chat processor. And the AI chat processor takes three strings. It takes the AI endpoint, the AI key, and the AI deployment. And we already just specified that when we created the Agnes settings class. So we can just pull that out, AI endpoint, AI access key, AI deployment name. So that sets it up. Now, a lot of things that you're going to be doing with AI require extensive asynchronous processing. So because of that, we can't use our console application as it stands now. We actually need to convert our console application into a type that's going to run in an asynchronous manner or is tolerant towards asynchronous processing. And to do that, we basically need to change this guy to async and then change that to say task. Right. Async tasks were introduced, I think, two versions of .NET and C# ago. Async tasks for the main method, not general async tasks. So now these are allowed. The other thing we want to do is we don't just want to create this standard. We actually want to add some settings to it or configure it a little bit. So we want to maximize how many tokens we can use so we're not killing ourselves with cost. I'm going to configure it to 800, and then we want to specify the temperature as 0. With that done, we can now initialize the processing. So behind the scenes, what initializing will do is it'll figure out what are all the plugins that are in this program, in this app domain, pull them all in, register them with whatever AI model you're using, and basically bootstrap the interactions that you're going to be having. Right, so this is an asynchronous call. So we're just going to do processor.initialize async. And within here, you can actually add some more things to the system prompt if you so desire. But for the purposes of this demo, we're just going to keep it all the way up here. Now, with that done, the next thing that we can do is we can basically actually call the processor. And to call the processor, we just say process user message. And in here, we just pass what we want to process. So I'm going to say, what is the price? Tea in London. Or actually, just what is the price of tea? I guess is fine. And we obviously have a response. So okay. And then we're just going to print out the response to the console. Okay, so to run this program, I'm going to clear the screen. You can run it in debug mode. You can actually just run it by doing .NET run in here. So down here, you can just do .NET run, and that will actually run it. But let's just run it in debug mode up here. Okay, and you see that we've gotten a response back, and the response says the price of tea in London is $10. So that's the same information that we had in our console application when we're sitting inside the playground. So nothing new here. I mean, we get it. It can spit out exactly what it is you're looking for it to do, right? There's nothing very interesting about this as it stands. But before we move to the next step, one thing that we want to do is we want to create a way to very quickly be able to ask it questions because right now it's basically hard coded to ask just one thing. So we're essentially going to put this into a REPL loop, and REPL stands for read, evaluate, process, right? So we're going to say while true. And then in here, we're going to do a console.write. Just going to prompt out AI. And then we're going to do var command equals console.read line. So that then reads the line that you specified. And then we want to make sure that because we're inside of a loop, we want to make sure that it ends, right? So if command is equal to end, then in here, we just want to break, else we would then process everything. Okay. So with this now, when we run it, we can actually ask it a number of questions. Okay. So there's our AI code. And in here, we can ask it again, what is the price of tea? And it gives us a response. And we can say, who is the president of the United States? And it says the price of tea is London. Well, why is it saying the price of tea is London no matter what we ask it? Because there's one thing that we haven't done, which is we haven't passed the command into the actual processing, right? So we're still hard coding the command. And this is done to sort of like illustrate the notion of not passing code directly into your AI platform. Always pass some kind of variable so that you have some control over it and you don't know whether, in the case where there's going to be some kind of static state. So now we're passing command in. And then while we're doing that, one thing you'll also know is that right now, the responses are not necessarily human readable. I mean, as developers, you understand that this is a JSON message, but a person looking at this agent may not have that understanding. So for that reason, we can use an overload of message that basically deserializes this into an actual object. And from our code, and from this, we can see that the object we need to deserialize to basically is just any object that has a message property in it. So let's go ahead and let's just create a quick object to hold this. In fact, we'll put it in the settings area. Public. Okay. So we now have an Agnes message. And I'm going to quickly go in here and disable nullable. Make it a little bit easier. So now over here, instead of just returning the string, I can return an Agnes message. And then in here, I can then do a response.message. Okay. So let's run this one more time and see how it functions. Oops. Okay, so we ask for the price of tea, still works the same. What is the time? Right, and it's going to fail. What is the president who is the president of the United States? and you're going to see that it says Joe Biden, right? So this is a great way for us to segue to the other component of an AI agent, which in terms of Zarya is called a skill, but in terms of AI theory and processing, it's called a tool call, right? So an AI is static. An AI is a gigantic, sophisticated, super fast database. But everything inside of an AI model has been preset data that's being leveraged and used. That's what the actual model is. And that process of taking data and storing it in a highly optimized manner such that these programs can run and create these responses that we use is that process of training, right? So we can ask it a question like, when were you trained? Right? And you see that the data that was used during its training basically goes up to June 2024. And of course, we know that it is now December 2025, and there was an election in November, and a new president was sworn in. So that data would not be available. So how do you make that data available? How do you work with real-time data within your agent? Well, you use, again, skills inside of Zarya that basically allow you to extend the capabilities that exist within your AI to add new information to your AI for it to use to process. So to create a skill, we basically create a new class that extends from AI agent. Yeah. Okay. And then inside of this agent, the first thing that I want to do is, if you look up here, we have two modalities that's set up. The first one is expecting for end to come, like a static command end. And then but then you're telling the user, hey, type in whatever you want and say what you want, and I'll do what you want. So there's a little bit of a mismatch here. What we ideally want is we want for the commands to close the program to be also evaluated by our AI and responded to as such. So let's go ahead and let's do that first. And before we do that, I'm going to create a little space here between AI. So to do that, we actually go ahead and let's create a new method. And any method that you want to be used as a skill has to have a skill response specified in it. It has to return a skill response. And then it also has to be decorated with an attribute called skill. It's just a skill attribute. The skill attribute just tells your AI model that you're using under what situations it should call this function. So what's happening in this flow is that the user is going to type stuff in, and if it's stuff that the AI doesn't know, it's going to reach out and say, hey, are there any skills that are configured that tell me how to do this? And then if there are, it's going to leverage those skills, and then it's going to basically execute this function ultimately. So in here, I'm just going to type call when you need to end the application, right? That's all. You're just telling the AI when you want this method to be called. And then in here, I'm just going to return success. And then in this success, I'm going to pass an end. Now, another thing that a skill response provides for you is a mechanism by which to return immediately once a skill is processed, or take the results of the skill and pass it back into the AI so that the AI can reprocess and present something more meaningful. In this case, we want to be deterministic because we want that end keyword passed back. We don't want any ambiguity to it. So we're going to say that we do not want to continue processing and that we're good at this point. Right? Then in here, what we're going to do is we're actually going to get rid of this. Actually, we're not really going to we're going to move it in here. And then because we might be bringing back messages that just say end versus messages that are structured and coming back from the AI, we can't do the deserialization here anymore, right? So we're going to leave this as just returning a response as a command. And if the response is end, then we break after we basically say something. Okay. And if it is not end, then what we want to do is we want to deserialize the response into an Agnes message. And then we basically want to get the message property of that, right? So this is functionally the same. The only difference is that, don't need this, sorry. The only difference is that instead of us directly sort of like running the command and having a difference between commands that you have to really know what you're typing in because it's very literal versus commands that you don't, we're basically passing the command into the AI, letting the AI determine intent. And then based on the intent that the AI determines, now responding back and processing that. So let's run this and let's see how this works. Okay, so I'm going to just type in, can you stop the application? I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to type in C. And there you go. I typed in, can you stop the application? And it says, thanks for chatting with me. And the application ends. So you don't even have to, as a user now, the user doesn't have to necessarily know that the command to stop the application is end. They only need to know that the command, they only need to know their intention and the AI processes it. And based on the AI processing it, it now returns. So here's that's the basic loop of using a tool call within an agent to do things. But another thing that a tool call can do is that you can do it to decorate and provide additional data that doesn't already exist. So in scenarios where you're working with private data or you want to have more deterministic data, you can also use tool calls for this. So what we're going to do now is we are going to add two more tool calls. One of them is going to tell us who the president is. And the other is going to tell us what time it is. So it follows the same format. We're going to return a success. And of course, as a program, you know that you can do a lot of things within there. But now in here, unlike with the end application call where we said we did not want it to continue processing, in this case, we do want it to continue processing. So we're going to say Donald J. Trump. And then over here, return success. And datetime.now. Okay. And to enable these, right now they're not working. So let's run it and see what happens with them not working. And you've seen this already, but this is just to illustrate, if not belabor the point. Who is the current president of the US? Still says Joe Biden. What is the time? It's unable to provide the time. Okay, so let's now add the skills. Let's now decorate them with the skills. And let's give the appropriate names for them. Call when you need. I'm just telling it, call when I need to know the president of the United States. And then over here, I'm saying, call when I need to know the date or time. That's it. So let's stop and rerun this. Right. And now if I ask who is the president, you see it's now saying that the president of the United States is Donald J. Trump. And it's not just returning just Donald J. Trump. It's actually formatting it in a natural language when returning to you. And if I say, what time is it? It's now giving me the date and time, December 31st, at this particular time of day. So that concludes today's session. I want to leave time for questions and answers on the topic. In further sessions, we're now going to take this and embed it into an app service, and we're going to add the ability for this to run autonomously and run in a web framework inside of a container, and all the different ways that you can build out an agent within .NET and C#. Do we have any questions?